Hey everyone, thank you for joining us in the Aotearoa Azure meetup. So I'm Amit, I'm a cloud consultant, and I used to be a network consultant for a very long time of my life, for 10 years. So this topic is really close and dear to my heart. So I used to be the guy who's building the global private WANs, and now I'm on the other side. So I'll show you guys today how we are going to build a what Microsoft called a Azure Virtual WAN. But before we do that, I just want to give you like a walk down the memory path as to how was the virtual WAN and the how did people actually used to build their WAN connection in global networks before using the Microsoft Azure Virtual WAN. So this is an example of a big company. So they've got offices all over the world. They've got offices in Asia. They've got offices in Europe. They've got a presence on Azure in multiple regions, and they've got multiple ways of connecting to their Azure resources. So, for example, in this case, you've got the Azure branch, which is directly connected to their presence using site-to-site VPN. You've got their data centers and their HQ using a global private WAN, and these are like the biggest telecom provider around the world. So, and then those the private WAN is connected to ExpressRoute, and then your Azure vWAN, your Azure virtual networks are connected through virtual network hubs. So I'll go through what that means, but I just wanted to show you how complex before to manage your connectivity for your offices, for your users, for your data centers, connecting that back to your resources. It was super difficult, and then there is a lot of difficulty that is actually hidden here in the global private WAN. Because there is a lot of engineering that needs to happen for you to have connectivity between your sites, and that is a very difficult type of engineering. Which site should talk to which, and then how do you allow traffic between all these guys? It used to be a very difficult task to do. So. Like now entering to the Azure vWAN. So the idea about Azure vWAN is that it's one solution that Microsoft is providing you to connect all type of connections back to your Azure resources. So you've got things like an ExpressRoute to your HQ, or like a big one of the main branches. For remote branches, you would be using a site-to-site VPN, which are all like IPsec channels. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about networking today. So an IPsec channel is just a way to connect two sites over the internet. It is being secured by using a protocol called IPsec. It encrypts and then provides a lot of security. And finally, you've got a point-to-site VPN, where this is where you've got work-from-home users that want to access your resources that you have on Azure, or even resources on your company premises. So the idea is that for the virtual WAN, what it does, it builds almost like it is actually a hub where you connect to all your resources, all your sites, and all your users, all with using one solution. So instead of having to talk to multiple telecom providers, instead of having to manage a lot of connections, instead of the difficulty when you are like building a network, the difficulty is actually the traffic flow. A lot of people actually don't talk about that. The traffic flow, which I mean, is that so you've got multiple sites. Who's allowed to talk to who, and how do they talk to? How do I manage that? How do I manage all of that with simplicity, without going and then building a lot of complex rules? So when you have a virtual WAN, it is all just like one place, all that connection goes back to this virtual WAN, and then you've got one place to roll it all. So that's the difficulty that, or the challenge, I should say, that Virtual WAN is trying to solve here. So to dig deeper into the details here, what we've got here is that, so we've got two regions that you've got a presence in, and one of them is in East US, and the other is in Singapore. And then you've got your VNets connecting to your Azure resources. You've got all the sites and the users and all of the all of your branches connected to your Azure resources. What happens is that you will have what is called a hub. The hub is just a router that you connect all your VNets and branches in a region to, and then you've got another hub in the other region, so you build two hubs, and then you connect those two hubs with what is called a virtual WAN. So the virtual WAN, sorry, I thought you have a question.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yep.
So I come back from the day of geo networks, for example.
Okay.
So this has obviously solved the problem as well as it's expanded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the beauty of actually virtual WAN, is that the idea is that it scales so easily. So it actually supports a lot of connections to the virtual WAN. So you can have hundreds, even thousands of remote sites that could actually be connected to just one virtual WAN. And then you've got even more like an even greater number with your users that connect to your Azure resources. And there is I can't just the idea of how simple it is to actually build the whole thing and then have it all managed in one place it is just so beautiful. It is like, for example, before, let's say you would have an AT&T type of vWAN, right? So I worked with one of the companies that had like 40 plus offices all over the world. And it was a nightmare when you had to manage the connection to all these guys, when you had to, like, we used SD-WAN, we tried to all sort of solution, but it's really difficult. And the other thing is that you don't get a lot of visibility. So when you talk to AT&T, you don't know really what goes behind the scenes. And I know that because as a telecom provider, you don't need to tell your customers what is connecting to what, right? But with the Azure Virtual WAN, in reality, you actually have a great idea, really understanding what is happening behind the scenes. You control the traffic, you could manage the traffic flow, you could filter it all. You are almost giving the power of building your own global network, and you can do that with with just a couple of clicks, you know. And then the time to actually build that global network is so much. It is actually, if you plan it well, you could build it in a day or two. You could connect all these sites into a global network, and then what is you could see here is that you've got what is called Microsoft Global Backbone. So what maybe a lot of people don't know is that Microsoft owns all the networks. So all connections between regions is actually Microsoft network. It is not rented. They build their own network. So it is really optimized for high speed and reliability. So when you build your network, it is so efficient. You have a lot of control, and at the same time, it is easier and a lot more cheaper, you know, as opposed to having to talk to a telecom provider, having to ask them, can I connect this site to that? And then even when issues happen, it is also very difficult to talk back to the telecom engineers and the rest of that. So the Azure Virtual WAN provided all of this in one place, so you could even actually use it to connect between branches. So you'll see that.
Oh, sorry, just finish the last question. Are you talking about between branches?
Oh yeah.
If I'm going from branch A to branch B, maybe over a global network, do you have control over like which path in the backbone it takes?
Yes.
So I can say I want this to, like, I want to go from Australia East to West Europe. I want it to go via Singapore. Like you do have that choice.
Yeah, actually you do.
Yeah.
You do. So the way you do that is that you've got I'll show you guys later on through the slide, is that you got what is called a hub. So each region, you need a hub.
Yeah.
You could have WAN vWAN or WAN virtual WAN, and then you connect all the hubs to it. The path that you pick is, in the networking world, we call that static route, but in Microsoft, they call it user-defined route, which is a UDR. The path that you build it is that you tell it, actually, if you want to reach a destination in the East US, your next hub is Singapore. And from Singapore, you say, okay, your next hub is the East US. Of course, I'm simplifying it a lot. And then the route back. The connection between the hubs, between those guys, is dynamic. So although you might, like, there's a beauty in static routes or UDR, where like you tell it, this is your next hub, this is what to do, but it's really difficult, and you could shoot yourself in the foot if you, for example, if you say, I want to reach destination B, and the next hub is, sorry, I want to reach C, next hub is B, you go to B, and it's like, oh yeah, I know how to reach C, it's actually back to A. And that's where you create a loop. Static routes is very easy where you create a loop, as opposed to use dynamic routing. The connection between those guys is dynamic. How the traffic flow is through it, you decide it. You could tell it where to go to.
So it's using like BGP?
Yeah, exactly. It's using BGP. Behind the scenes, it's using BGP. BGP is a border gateway protocol. It's a protocol that is used in the networking world. It is the protocol that is running the internet. The idea is that each telecom provider, each company have got a what is called an autonomous number. It's a lot of technology, a lot of tech jargon that I'm telling you here. But the idea is that each company has got almost like an address. So you say, okay, we've got the information to reach a specific destination. So if you want to reach this is our number. And then everybody on the internet announcing destinations, and those numbers tell you how to reach from point A to B. So BGP is the protocol that is being used between those hubs to connect them dynamically. You don't need to worry about that. But the traffic between branches, the traffic between your Azure resources into to your offices, to the users, this is where you define it. This is where you tell it where to go to and what to use. Right. This is what is called actually a hub and spoke architecture. The idea of a hub and spoke is that a spoke is an edge network. Everything that is in the edge, there is no network behind that. So for example, this is the VNet, there is no network after that. This is a branch office, the user, all these guys are called a spoke. And then in the middle, you've got the hub. This is a very proven and successful architecture in networking. The idea behind this is that this one scales really well. Without a hub and spoke, what you have to do actually is that you have to connect all these guys together for them to talk. So if you have two VNets, that's not a big deal, right? So you connect these guys together, life is easy, right? But once you've got, like, let's say you have 4, now you have to connect this, right? So you have to connect this guy to all these 3, and then again you have to connect this guy to all these 3, and it actually is I think it's an exponential number. So like the more sites you add, you have to create more, like what we call in networking a full mesh. You have to connect this side to every single site. So if you've got 100 or like a simple number like 40 or 50, you literally have to have a 50 connection to every single site. With the hub and spoke, you don't have to do that. You just have one connection. The spoke just talks to the hub. The hub takes care of routing. So every connection goes through the hub. If a VNet talks to a VNet, that goes through the hub. If a branch goes to another branch, again goes through the hub. So that's the beauty of the hub and spoke. It makes it so much easier to scale your network. And at the same time, there is another side benefit to it, is that since all traffic goes through the hub, excuse me, it's a great place to actually apply security. It's a great place to enforce all the rules that you say, you know what, I don't want this. For example, if those VNets talk to each other, it's all right. But if those VNets want to go to a branch, then that needs to talk to the firewall. If a VNet actually wants, let's assume this is the internet, if a VNet wants to talk to the internet, they need to go through the firewall. So that is, the hub is actually in the middle of the traffic flow. So you don't have to force the traffic to say, go to the firewall, check if you are allowed, and then send it out. It is already going to the hub, so you could easily enforce your security within the hub. Did you have a question? Okay. Sorry I'm going so fast, and if you guys have any questions, please stop me. Cool. Right, let's go back to our case that we just started with. So again, so we've got this big company, they've got offices all over the world, they connect with different ways, and it is really difficult for them to manage all that. When we introduce the virtual WAN, just like that, it becomes so much simpler. Now, what we've got, so we've got for example, the Azure data center and the Azure HQ. They still use the private WAN. We don't care about that because the express route goes back to the hub. If you've got all sort of branches that use the internet, as in like a site to site, again they go back to the hub, right? And the hub is it's behind the scenes a virtual router. It's the device that routes traffic between destinations. So you connect all those circuits to the hub in each region, and then the virtual WAN is the link, or like the almost like the management for all of this. So this is where you've got one place where you could control or build the whole network. So now all the branches, all the regional roaming users, like working from home users, using the internet going back to the hub. If you've got an HQ using the express route, again you go back to the hub, and all the regions here, including the Azure regions, all connect to one virtual WAN. So just by that, you could see how much simpler it is to manage all those. And in the future, if you've got more connection, more users, more sites, you just plug them into the virtual WAN, and life is easy.
Question.
Yep.
So licensing, in days of old, you only really connected in your particular regions. But connecting the other one, you have to have a licensing for the other one. How is that? Does that more or less circumnavigate that, or is it?
Are you talking about what when you mean licensing?
Like for example, if you're using dynamics in one region, you got one source of truth.
Right.
And that be obviously be shared amongst all the other regions.
From the documentation that I read, is that the documentation talks about using the hub as a place where you have all the common services. So you could,
Okay.
yeah, you could have all the common services like a file server, data domain controller, all those, a database or whatever, all common services, you could put it all in the hub. This way it makes it so much easier to access it from, yeah.
I figured that was the case, but I was wondering.
Yeah, that will make it so much easier, and I
Yeah.
think you don't need to duplicate resources, you don't need to have it, unless you need them for some reason to have them in WANs, in hubs, so you put them in a hub in each region.
I think
If
there's
you
about
want to have
3 places in the whole wide world where you've got to have extra, like Germany or something, whatever it is, but in general though, that's great.
Okay. Sweet. Cool. So we talked about the firewall, and one of the questions that James asked is that the traffic flow. So the traffic flow, what we call in networking and systems as well, this is what is called as east to west. So traffic that is going to, for example, between branches, between users and the HQ, it goes through the firewall, and then of course you could enforce the policies there. Traffic between VNets, if they are crossing regions. So this could be firewalled or it could be not. Depends on like how strict it is. For example, if there is like a business critical application that is sitting in this VNet, so you want to actually, even though they're in the same region, you want all the traffic going into it to be filtered and enforce the policies. If not, then they could just talk to each other without going through the firewall. It's a recommendation and a good best practice to filter traffic between regions, because although you've got a lot of tools to mitigate security risk, it is not really good to have the gates open if something can compromise in one region, that the whole network, the whole global network becomes compromised. So it is a good, yeah.
whole network becomes compromised. When we're talking like on-prem versus cloud networking, does like you said it supports Azure Firewall, but like Palos or Cisco ASAs on premise. Is there a way to deploy those inside of the vWAN?
Yes, actually, that's a very good question. So, Microsoft, of course, they've got their own Azure Firewall, but in saying that, it is not, there are a lot more functionality that exists in third-party firewall providers. So Microsoft have got what is called almost like a native support for example, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and for SD-WAN, I believe they do support Cisco solutions. The idea is that, for example, if you deploy a firewall that is not a native to Azure, you will have to deploy it on a virtual machine. When you deploy it on a virtual machine, it becomes really difficult because you have to really force the traffic with a lot of static routes saying, go to the firewall, next hop is the firewall. But if you've got it, if it's natively supported within Microsoft, you just deploy it as a service from the marketplace, and it is embedded in the path. So Microsoft take care of it. It is managed by Microsoft. And the whole traffic goes through it without having you to say, you know what, go through the firewall with every next hop. You could just say if you want to connect, if you want to talk to a to a branch or to an office, go to the hub, and then the hub having the firewall with the traffic path, it just enforces the policies. So is that what you're asking? Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on the policies that you've got here. So it depends on what are you trying to implement or enforce. It is just trying to show you, this diagram is just trying to show you that the firewall could be used to filter traffic between regions, or which is in the next slide. This is what we call a north-south traffic. So, for example, in the same region, you've got traffic between the branch to the VNet, or cross region, and again, traffic in the same region going to from an office, which is the express route icon here, goes to the Azure VNet. The third use of Azure Firewall, of course, this is showing the traffic going. This is showing the traffic going to the internet. There is another diagram that actually shows traffic coming in, but it's the same idea. The idea is that, of course, when you want to send traffic to the internet, you need to go through the firewall, and again, the firewall being in the traffic path, it is easier to actually do that. Right. So for our demo today, this is what I had, what I built. So we've got two VMs in two regions. We've got a spoke VNet. We've got a hub in each region, Azure Virtual WAN, and then of course we've got our routing table on these, connected to each of these hubs. I'll see if I can actually share my Azure portal. I cheated a bit here today because creating a hub actually takes 45 minutes. So because it actually deploys what is called a virtual network gateway, which is a router that Microsoft maintains for you, and it takes 45 minutes for each hub to be created. But I'll take you through the examples. So we've got the VMs in two regions. Two of them in Australia, two of them in the Southeast Asia. And then we've got the resource group where we've got all our resources deployed in. So what I created is that I created two VNets, and then I created two VNets in each region. I created a hub, connected those VNets to the hub, and then created a VM in each region, and then used virtual WAN to check if I was able to have connectivity between those VNets or those VMs using the virtual WAN as a connection. So this is our virtual WAN. To create a virtual WAN, actually you just go here and then virtual. just created U1. And then for that, you just need to specify the resource group, you put it in whatever resource group, where do you want to put the virtual WAN. By the way, the virtual WAN could sit in any region. So I put it in the, I believe in the Australia East, and then it could connect to hub in any other region. You don't have to have the virtual WAN deployed in multiple regions. It's just one. And then of course you just give it a name, and then what type of, so let's say, IMXD WAN, and then you review, create, you just go validate your configuration, make sure that it is all right. And then once it is done that, it comes back and say it's ready to be created. So validation passed, I could create it here. That's how I created the this virtual one. And then once you're inside the virtual one, that's where you start to create your hubs. So in here, I've got a hub in Australia East, and I've got a hub in Singapore. If I click on this one, you see there is a site-to-site VPN between those hubs connected. And this is the routing table that tells it what to do with the traffic. So just a second. Right. Yeah, so as you can see here, the routing table is just saying that if you want to reach this destination, use the next hub as the connection to the Australia East. If you want to use this, if you want to reach this destination, use the Singapore. So this is where we tell the hub what to do with the traffic. So we created those VNets, we connected them to the hub. But once the hub receives the traffic, it doesn't know what to do with it. It knows that it actually has reachability to the other hub, but it doesn't know until you tell it, I want you to let those VNets talk to each other. So that's where the routing table comes in. And in the hub, in the WAN, sorry, that you need to connect to the virtual networks that you want them to talk through the WAN to the virtual WAN. That's where you go to the virtual network connections. It just takes a while. Yeah. And in here, as you can see, in the Australia East, we connected one VNet. And in the Singapore or the Southeast Asia, we connected another VNet. So with that, we have created the vWAN, we have created two hubs, we have connected those hubs to the VNets. And inside the hub, we've got the routing table. The only thing left is to check if the VMs are able to reach each other. So there are two ways to do that. So there is something that we really love to do all the time, which is when you go to a VM and then click on the networking, it shows you the network interface card that is being used for this VM. And when you click on it, it tells you the effective route. What the effective route is, this is actually tells you what is the VM going to use when it's trying to reach anything on the internet or even on Microsoft network. Not a lot of people actually know about this. In here, we could see that it is using the virtual network gateway as a next hop, which is the right thing, which is the gateway for the VNet to reach each other. So this VNet, this VM is able to reach, it's got the routing table to reach the other destination. And the other way, which is to just log into to those virtual machines using remote desktop. So I'm just logging into one of the machines. Demos are always hard. Right, so let me stop sharing this screen now. Let me share. So, cool. So, this command tells us what is the IP address of this machine. So this is the IP address of the machine. If you want to connect, if you want to make sure that it is able to reach the internet, so let's say google.com works. Ping is a command we use to verify connectivity. We actually just send the packet and then wait for the reply. If it's received the reply, it knows that this destination is reachable. The other machine, I believe, the IP address was 10.3. So ping 10.3.0.5. Yeah. So with that, we were able to connect two virtual machines within two VNets, those in each one in a different region, without having to establish WAN connection, and it's using actually Microsoft backbone in the behind the scenes. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Thank you guys. So you don't have any questions?